the entire school staff from my awful boarding school and jail. I guess I have a pretty interesting story to share with you. But before I go on, make sure you hit that subscribe button or you're a rotten egg. Anyways, there I was at my all-girls boarding school, enjoying the weather and some peace and quiet during my free period, when it was interrupted by some shouting. I opened my eyes and looked down the hill to see some of the other girls running on the track for gym class, and the two gym teachers yelling at them. Awful things, like, "You run like a chicken!" as they would mockingly squawk and laugh. Or, "Hey chubby, an extra 2 laps for you, you need it!" I just shook my head. At this point, I was pretty used to hearing stuff like this around there. This was typical behavior for the whole staff. Some were more extreme than others, but it was all basically the same treatment. And the girls? They all seemed totally brainwashed and just accepted the treatment like it was completely normal. All the girls, that is, except me and my friend Jenny. We knew this wasn't right, but even we complied for the most part. Heck, if we didn't, there were more serious consequences. It wasn't worth it. At least, it wasn't until things got out of hand. I like to think of myself as pretty tough. I come from a strict military home, and even that couldn't break me. At least that's what my parents say, which is why they sent me there. For a while, I thought that place wouldn't be able to get to me either. But there I was, 3 months in, and I was simply drained. Like, I'm pretty sure my eyes were sunken in, and I even shuffled my feet when I walked, kind of drained. I was in need of a serious boost, so I went to hang with Jenny. I needed her to snap me out of it. But when I got to her dorm, she was super distant. She would hardly even make eye contact with me. "I can't stand this anymore!" I shouted, using all the energy I had left. "I hate it here!" Usually, these types of speeches would get her riled up, which would then fire me up even more. And this always gave us enough energy to at least get through another week. But this time, something was different. "I don't know, Chelsea," she said. "Maybe we just need to accept that this is what it is, and things aren't going to change." "What?" I snapped back. "Something seems off with you, Jen. What's going on?" "Nothing," she replied. "I just don't think I have it in me to keep fighting it anymore. I'd almost rather just make things easier and go along with it, you know? We only have a couple more years anyways." Only a couple more years? I felt ready to explode. This was not the Jenny I knew. What on earth had happened to her? "Jenny, you know what would happen if we just give in completely? We'd end up like all the other girl." I stopped in mid-sentence as I noticed some red marks on her arm. She saw me notice and tried to cover it up. "No way. Don't try to hide it," I pleaded. "Jenny, talk to me. What happened to your arm?" "I don't want to talk about it," she said. It sounded like she was going to cry. "Jenny, you know you can tell me. What did they do to you?" She just burst out in tears. I went to give her a big hug and she melted into me. I knew exactly what had happened. After that point, all of the exhaustion I had been experiencing went away. I was on fire, and I'm pretty sure nothing would have put it out. At least, not until I got my revenge. The next day, I woke up with a totally new outlook. I wasn't going to let this slide anymore, even if I had to make the change all on my own. I hadn't wanted to call my parents before, but after last night and seeing Jenny broken the way she was and how bad her arm looked, I knew it was time. My dad answered. "Hey, Chels," he said, sounding very serious as usual, as if we hadn't not spoken for over a month. "How are things?" "Dad," I started, feeling a bit nervous. "I have to tell you something." I filled him in on everything that had been going on and ended with last night. "It's awful, Dad. We have to report them," I finished. "Chelsea, not everyone is going to give you a fluffy life like you had growing up. Sometimes tough love is the best way to learn a lesson." I was stunned. He continued. "And as for Jenny, you don't even know what happened if she wouldn't tell you. You're jumping to conclusions. Maybe she just fell or even hurt herself." I was shaking. I felt so mad. "No, Dad, you don't understand. This isn't tough love. This is abuse and cruelty. Sounds to me like you're being dramatic as usual, Chels. I have to go, but take care of yourself, all right? Chin up, shoulders back." And then he hung up. On my way to class, I was in a complete daze, stewing over my dad's and my conversation. So much so that I accidentally wandered over to the headmistress's courtyard. I had never been over there since the first day I arrived. When I overheard the headmistress talking to another teacher outside of her building, I snapped out of it and stopped dead in my tracks. They were laughing. They only ever laughed when they were making fun of the students. I decided to eavesdrop and got a closer look. "It's almost too easy!" This was one of the science teachers. "This batch of girls is just so pathetic. Breaking their sad little spirits is almost no fun." They both broke into a maniacal laughter again as the headmistress replied, "We know that isn't true. It's always fun." Then they were almost in tears from laughing so hard. I was furious, and I knew I needed Jenny on board with me. I was even more motivated to make a change now, but this was definitely not something I could take on my own. Jenny and I had math together next. When she got there, she still looked totally down in the dumps. I tried to get her attention, but she didn't even look my way. So I wrote her a note and walked by her desk before class, slipping it in her hand. The note said, "We gotta talk, and don't worry, it isn't about what I saw, it's about what I heard." After reading the note, she looked over at me with sad eyes, but she nodded her head yes. On our way back to the dorms from class, I told her everything I had overheard from the principal and the science teacher. "Even the headmistress?" she said. "I don't know why I'm surprised. She's probably the one who's purposely hiring all these psychos." "Yeah," I agreed, "and I know what you said last time, but you know we have to do something, right?" She looked at me hesitantly and shook her head as she said, "I know, but what can we possibly do?" And the truth was, I had no clue. "We'll think of something," I said, and I felt sure of it. There was no way I was going to let them get away with this. Jenny and I stayed up all night in her dorm talking and plotting ways we could take them down. I explained to her that all we needed was proof. Anyone that sees this kind of behavior towards children has to know it's wrong. She agreed. We fleshed out the whole idea. We would have to sneak our phones around with us, which is strictly prohibited anywhere on campus but the dorms. Any video or soundbite we could get would be helpful. And we created a cloud file where we would save everything. And once we had enough evidence, we would send it to the authorities and let them handle the rest. And just like that, our plan began. We first made sure to unlock our phones for quickest access. Then we picked our baggiest clothes. We needed our phones to stay well hidden. Next, we cut up some old shirts and made pockets on the inside of our baggy clothes, which I sewed on. This would give us the easiest access to our phones at any time. As we tried on our new spyware, we looked at each other and began laughing our own maniacal laugh. This could really work. I fell asleep in Jenny's dorm, and the next morning, we got right to it. We both woke up with so much energy and jumped straight into our outfits. I felt excited and nervous as I slid my phone into its secret pocket. Here we go, I thought. That day alone, we both got more footage than we expected. Little things, like my art teacher calling one of the girls art ugly, to bigger things, like one of the teachers losing her temper and kicking the desk of a student who had fallen asleep in class. And we saved each video to the cloud as soon as we could. By the end of the day, we were giddy with our success. And the next day, I felt completely confident as I geared up for battle. Well, as it turns out, I was perhaps a bit too confident, which made me a bit careless. Because in math class that day, the teacher began shouting at one of the students. Jenny and I both looked at one another, and I nodded as if to say, "I got it." I went to pull out my phone, but moved too quickly. My phone tumbled out of the pocket and dropped to the floor. Boom! It felt like the loudest noise in all of history. The entire class turned towards me. My eyes got huge, and my heart started to feel like it was going to pound out of my chest. I looked over to Jenny, who was now ghostly white. The teacher, who had been hovering over the other student, now looked at me and slowly began moving towards me. I tried to grab my phone, but I knew it was useless. She rushed towards it and scooped it up first. "What a nice new phone I have," she said, looking at me with evil in her eyes. "Or perhaps the headmistress is in need of a new phone herself." I felt sick. "Please, madam, I needed to have my phone on me today. My brother is sick," and I was scrambling, trying to come up with anything to save myself. It didn't work. "What a pity," she said. "If only phones were allowed in my classroom. But they're not. We'll finish this later." And she walked away. I'm not even sure what happened all the rest of class. I was in total panic mode, thinking of all the worst case scenarios. After class, Jenny and I went back to her dorm. "Jenny, my phone is unlocked. What if she goes through it and sees everything? Imagine the punishment then." My mind was spiraling out. "Oh man, I'm done for." "Chelsea, we have way too much dirt on them already, and we can't just let this stop us," she said. "I know we wanted to have more footage before sending anything to the cops, but I think we should go ahead and send it now." I wasn't in the mood to be optimistic, but this made perfect sense. Jenny took the reins as she emailed the local police department, attaching the cloud file with a compilation of videos and a note explaining everything that had been happening at the school. "Sent. Now we wait," she said, and gave me a much-needed hug. The next day, my stomach was in knots. Everything seemed normal enough for a while, and I started to think that maybe things would just get swept under the rug. That is, until towards the end of the day, I was called into the headmistress's office. This is it, I thought. My arms and who knows what else, are going to come out looking like Jenny's. I was shaking as I walked all the way to the headmistress's courtyard and into her office. When I got there, the door was wide open. I walked in, and she was sitting at her desk with her hands placed on top, fingers interlaced. Right next to her hands was my phone and a ruler. She looked calm, eerily so. "Close the door and take a seat," she said with a totally even voice. I gulped hard as I did just that. I tried to look as relaxed as I possibly could, considering the circumstances. Once I was fully seated, a wicked smile swept across her face and her whole mood shifted. She picked up my phone. "I found some very interesting videos on your phone, young lady. School project?" she said sarcastically. Then, with the same calmness, she set my phone down and picked up the ruler. She began to pat her other hand with it as she continued. "It seems you have not yet learned how to respect authority, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to teach you." She stood up from her chair and began to walk towards me, when suddenly the door behind me slammed open. She and I were both completely startled as an entire team of police officers stormed into the room. "Both of you, hands up!" one of them shouted. I raised my hands and watched as she quickly shifted back into her collected demeanor, slowly placing the ruler on the desk so as not to draw attention to it, and putting her hands up, looking confused. "If I may, what seems to be the issue here?" she asked. "We have reason to believe that there is foul play going on in this establishment, Miss Simmons. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to investigate," said the officer who seemed to be leading the charge. Just great. He knows her by name, I thought. She was, after all, well known in the community and considered an honorable authority. "Oh dear," she said in a way that, had I not known what I do know, I would have thought she was genuinely shocked and concerned. "This is disturbing news. I can assure you that you have my full cooperation. So much so that I guarantee that I will personally look into these matters myself." "Actually, Miss Simmons, you are one of the named persons of interest, along with every other staff member in the school," the officer replied. At this point, the headmistress acted completely dumbfounded and said, "For heaven's sake! You must know just how preposterous this sounds." "I indeed know how it sounds, and I hope it is all preposterous, as you say," the officer said. He seemed to mean it. "However, we have video evidence that there is misconduct going on here, which makes a very trying case." The headmistress looked at him with a look of disgust as she said, "I'm certain that those clips must have been taken completely out of context. Our staff would never engage in any misconduct with our students. We run a very tight and straight ship here." The officer looked as though he desperately wanted to take her word for it. She continued, "You can even interview all the children here. We can rally them all together in the gym so as to make things easier. You certainly have my permission to do whatever it is you must in order to clear this up." After that, the officer had shifted into looking purely apologetic as he said, "Thank you for your understanding, Miss Simmons. We won't be long." I was so nervous. I knew none of the other girls, aside from maybe Jenny, would speak up, and I didn't want to throw her under the bus myself. I wanted to give her the option to back out of this mess. I had started this whole thing after all. Officer," I said with a shaky voice, "I was the one who sent the videos. I can attest to the fact that there is serious foul play going on here." "Oh, this is the girl who sent the videos?" the headmistress scoffed. "She's been a troublemaker from the very beginning. It all makes perfect sense now." She was shaking her head in disapproval, putting on the perfect act. The officer said, "Of course, Miss Chelsea," I replied. "Thank you, Miss Chelsea. Let's go and speak with your fellow students and see if anyone else has noticed anything suspicious and can back up your case." We went to the gym, where the headmistress had summoned all of the students and staff. At this point, I was sweating bullets knowing everyone was going to be there and not knowing what would happen. "Hello, ladies," the officer began. "Thank you for your time and attention. We don't intend to waste anyone's time, but we have received communications that there may have been some foul play here at this campus. We're here to investigate and need any one of you who have reason to believe this to be true to stand up. We would like to interview you directly." In that moment, you could have heard a pin drop. Nobody budged. I looked over at Jenny, and she was staring off into nothing, wide-eyed and completely frozen. Then I looked over at the headmistress, who looked completely smug and confident. Great, Jenny is frozen, and all of the rest of the girls were too terrified and brainwashed to speak up, I thought. "Ladies, this is very serious. I need for you to make it be known if there have been any problems with anyone from the staff here that we should know about." He tried again. Still nothing. I felt as though I saw my life flash before me. I was toast. "Okay, ladies, this is the last time I'm going to ask before we leave and close this case for good. Is there anyone who would like to speak on behalf of these allegations? I wasn't even sure if anyone was breathing. It was so quiet. There wasn't so much as a sniffle in the room. The officer turned to his team, and they deliberated for a few moments before announcing, "Thank you everyone for your time. I think we're done here. Again, we apologize for the inconvenience. We hope you all have a good day." The officer was cut short when a sharp sound came from the bleachers. We all looked over at Jenny, who was now standing, still looking wide-eyed and scared. But she was standing. There was hope. I can back her on this, she said as she pushed her sleeve up her arm, exposing the faint marks that still remained. "Okay, miss. You can come with us," the head officer said to her. But this was cut off again by yet another girl standing up. "Me too," she whispered. Then another girl, and another. Soon enough, at least half the girls were standing, while others still slowly gaining the courage to join. All color had completely drained from the headmistress's face, which was now ghostly white, and the teachers all looked shocked and horrified. The officers all nodded at one another as they each walked over and handcuffed everyone in the staff. The headmistress was still protesting and demanding to speak with her lawyer as the officers walked her out from the gym and towards the police cars. And the other girls and I were all hugging and crying, celebrating our victory. For the first time ever on that campus, we all felt at total ease.